Baseball is back, at least for now, and at least in an abbreviated fashion. And we're going to get to all of that today. I'm Annie Heilbrunn, sports multimedia journalist for the San Diego Union-Tribune, joined today by Kevin Acee, Padres beat writer, and sports columnist Bryce Miller. Now, we've got a lot to unpack, especially concerning the last 24 hours and the return of baseball. But I want to start with the negotiations. Basically turned out to be 3 months of animosity, really, between the players and the owners that resulted in no deal, but an imposed 60-game season by Commissioner Manfred. Now, Kevin, you covered every back and forth that had to do with this, every failed negotiation and proposal. What is your takeaway on the negotiations, and how do you think it's going to affect the relationship between the players and the owners going forward?
The relationship between the union and the owners is bad. Now, I don't know that between the players as a whole and the owners it's terrible. And how I would differentiate it is, I mean, they're union leaders and it's their job to get the absolute best deal for the players. And so they're going to take a much harder line. The players, by and large, only get involved when there's a crisis. A lot of them, just like the rest of us, are concerned about the day-to-day and how are they going to put food on the table and, make the car payment, the house payment, and all that stuff. Despite it being painted as owners against players, like the owners were one person and the players were one person and it was unanimous, they all hate each other. That's not the case. Now, what does that mean for future negotiations? Look, there's been a lot of optimism in the last 24 hours that, hey, maybe, we're going to get this worked out. I think we'll be okay. We're going to, take some late momentum. I don't know about that. It does not look good. And also, I have continued to hear a lot of pessimism, especially from the league side, that the union is dug in. The union leadership is dug in, and they're tired of getting kicked around. That's how the players feel, that the owners have made a lot more money percentage-wise as revenues have risen than players have, and players, or the union, I should say, is not going to let that continue to happen.
Yeah, that's an important distinction. I'm glad you made that between the players' union and the players versus the owners. So I'm glad you said that. Bryce, you wrote a column about this for the Union-Tribune on Tuesday, saying that there could be fallout for the fans, though, that maybe the fans are tired of seeing the bickering, especially during a pandemic and the racial unrest that we've seen. Do you think that fans will let all of that go once games start?
Well, I think there's two ways to look at it. One, the fans are incredibly frustrated. How frustrated, how far this goes, how long it lingers, we'll find out once they start playing games. But a couple of stats I included in the column, and I ran this by a few people who are in higher placed positions inside of baseball to just see if this is a fair metric. The Associated Press every year does an annual survey of salaries, and for the last 5 years, we see contracts for Steven Strasburg and Manny Machado, and we think those salaries collectively are exploding. That's not the case. It's been an average of $4.4 million, which is still in the millions, but it's been stagnant essentially for the last 5 years. And the last time that happened, according to the AP, was back at the start of the free agency in the mid-1970s. Meanwhile, the owner's valuation of franchises continues to rise significantly. The Padres alone are valued by Forbes at $1.45 billion. So that's different than operational money that's available to you on a day-to-day basis, but all of them essentially are sitting on piles of money simply by owning teams. So the fans are starting to get frustrated with the millionaire-billionaire argument, but I think they also are beginning to feel more so that owners have the ultimate control and responsibility to put baseball back on the field. I talked to Brett Boone, local guy, Rancho Santa Fe, had a long 14-year career in baseball. He was an assistant player rep in '94, the strike year under Hal Morris with the Reds. And he said, it's like a bank. If there's a big business deal for a bank behind the scenes, it's not public. People don't care what those business deal negotiations are. They just want to be able to walk up and take out their money when they need it. Baseball is the same way for fans. They just want to see games. They want to be able to follow games. They don't care how the sausage is made. But that said, once they begin to play, I think this season will be fascinating. It's a sprint, not a marathon. Baseball's built to be a grind and a marathon. Every game will matter. Every pitching decision will matter. And I think it has the potential, especially for fans who've waited this long for the game to return. I think once it starts, I think it will be electric. And I know that's kind of a heavy-handed word, but I really do, just because of the structure and the timing.
60 games, it does actually seem like a lot of fun with the different kind of rules and the fact that it's really anyone's grab as far as making it to the postseason. So that's what we've got: 60 games, a universal DH, a schedule based mostly on playing within your division and your region. So first of all, is this legitimate? Is this World Series, if you should win it, is it legit in this kind of season? And the second part of that question is, does this fare better for the Padres to have a shorter season?
I think the answer is yes to both. It's legitimate and it favors the Padres. Now, look, I just posted a story on the UT website that there's a lot of evidence that for the other way too, that it's not legitimate. More often than not, the team, or as often as not, the team that ended up winning a division over the past 10 years was not in first place in its division at 60-game mark. Now, most of those still made the playoffs as a wild card, or would have in a 60-game season as a wild card. But the cream does not get a chance to rise to the top, as Bryce alluded to. It's a grind. And I mean, look at the last time the Padres made the playoffs. It was 2006. Since then, they would have maybe been in contention 3 times, when we can say they really haven't been in contention in a decade under his 162-game format. But take 2010. The Padres were in first place till September. They faded, the Giants surged. Well, there will be no dog days of summer now. The season is starting till summer. The playoffs are on. The playoff race is on from opening day. So I do think it favors the Padres. I'd like to hear Bryce's input, but in terms of depth and talent on the pitching staff, that is huge in the Padres' favor. And as far as other teams that maybe have strength over the length of a season, like the Dodgers, well, that's somewhat diminished. And the Dodgers bullpen is a question. I think it really does give the Padres more than a fighting chance.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that too, since Kevin mentioned it. I think that all you have to do is look back to last year. The Nationals won the World Series. They started 19-31. In an abbreviated season, they wouldn't even have made the playoffs. They went on and won the World Series. The Pirates at the All-Star break, I think were 1 game under 500. By the end of the year, they were 22 games out. So a very short window doesn't draw a legitimate picture of what full seasons of baseball produce. That said, everyone is going to be in the same boat. Everybody's playing under the same circumstances, same set of rules, but it absolutely favors a team like the Padres, who some of the Vegas odds are coming out on win totals for the season, whatever those mean, but they're at least interesting to look at. And the Padres are figured into that middle group. And with kind of expanded opportunities with the short season and the playoff structure the way it is, any team can get hot for a month or two. It's hard to be hot for 6 months. So this shortened schedule puts the Padres legitimately in the mix.
Yeah, every game counting as much as I saw 2.7 games, right? So every game counting as much as 3 games there. Now, all of this is contingent on the season coasting into the World Series, which we don't know will happen. We are seeing coronavirus cases spiking all around the country. And this is based on players policing themselves. Sure, they're going to have policies. They're going to have their own rosin bags. They can't shower after games. But when they leave the ballpark, they're really going to have to police themselves out in the real world. They won't be in a bubble. How do you think they're going to fare as far as doing this?
You bring up a point that I knew you would, because it's something that's going to hang over this season. We're all very excited that baseball is back, but I still have this kind of thing in my head, man, is this going to be yanked out from us at any moment? Now, I don't want to be an alarmist, though. I want to point out that these guys are going to be as safe as anyone out there, all right? Because a vast majority of their time, they're going to be in a controlled environment. They're going to be tested far more than the rest of us. They're going to be monitored. Now, as you said, and I think this is the key, and I look forward to talking to some health professionals about it, it's the policing of themselves, because they are not going to be in a bubble like the NBA players. You would like to think they're adults. You would like to think they make a lot of money and they're going to take care of themselves, but stuff happens.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how to feel about this, and I don't feel like anybody can predict anything related to this, because human behavior is a factor, as Kevin was kind of pointing out. They just came off the horse racing season in a closed environment at Santa Anita and reported just yesterday, I think, 17 cases. LSU and college football, Sports Illustrated reported they're not even into workout modes where they're collectively together in bigger ways. 30 cases. That's like a quarter of the entire roster. So you go through these things, even with the safest protocols, there are going to be cases. There are going to be positive cases. But at one point that somebody brought up the other day in a discussion I had with somebody in baseball, it's going to be the tolerance level of baseball and health officials. Because I think a situation, if there are 3 positive cases on a team, that's very different. What happens if a team's in the National League Championship game and they have 10 players suddenly test positive? What do you do then? Those are 2 very different scenarios. And I don't think we know how everyone's going to react or what they're going to feel comfortable with and what that looks like. But there are going to be positive cases.
I don't want to be like callous because we don't know what can happen. We hear cases of 21-year-olds seemingly perfect health and they have a severe case and even death. However, it's not just like the cases. And again, it's not that, oh, hey, a bunch of Phillies tested positive. Well, they weren't tested before they went to the facility. They weren't under these strict protocols. Nothing's off the table in terms of what can happen. But I think Bryce made some good points about public appetite, health officials' appetite, baseball's appetite for how much they can tolerate. But to say that it's going to fail, I'm kind of pushing back against that. I'm seeing kind of the alarmist thing out there, and it's like, you know what? Some of these people were going to get it anyway. I have asthma. I'm going to be going to the ballpark. I got to go back to work. That's the way it is. Some of these LSU football players, Phillies players, Astros players, maybe they got it somewhere else, and they would if there were no baseball season. So I honestly think that these teams are going to try to take care of their commodities, and that, we'll just have to see.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be dependent too on the optics throughout the rest of the country, whether or not cases continue to rise, or maybe we see some kind of mitigation going on. So I think it's going to depend on a lot of factors that I don't even think baseball knows yet. One of the things that they're going to do is they're going to let more players be part of their team, especially at the beginning, and have a bigger taxi squad. Kevin, what do you think our chances are of seeing Mackenzie Gore, Taylor Trammell, Luis Patino? What do you think our chances are of seeing them this season?
Some of it's going to depend on what happens around them, who stays healthy. Also, the Padres will try to win, especially, we've just said, and they believe it, that they got a real good chance, right? But they're also going to try to develop those players. For sure, you're going to see Taylor Trammell, Luis Patino, Mackenzie Gore on the taxi squad. They're going to get to play intra-squad games. They're going to be around veteran players. This is going to be good for them. Whether we're going to see them in the majors, I think there's a better, or there's as good a chance as we were going to an 162-game season. I think it remains to be seen whether it's better. I mean, it's a shorter season. You got to think that there's going to be a whole bunch of players that are going to play every game or darn to it. Pitchers, they're not going to have a chance really to, take a look at the Padres last year. Their bullpen was lights out for 2.5 months and then fell apart at points because they were overworked. Well, there's no such thing as that this season. So we'll see, but there's a good chance that we're going to see these guys around, whether they're working out in Elsinore or Peoria during the season.
Bryce, on the flip side of that, do you think that we'll see players, whether on the Padres or on other teams, maybe bigger name players, sit this one out, or perhaps not give it their all, or not want to risk injury in such a short season?
I think you'll absolutely see some of that. The reality of it is that in the spectrum of players, there are different salaries, different, health stability levels, and some players who've made their money, maybe they do, and they have a legitimate reason. Maybe it's just not sitting it out because they have the financial ability to do it, but maybe they have somebody in their household that's immunodepressed or, have underlying health issues. And you've got to respect people who are going to make that bigger choice about family ahead of the money they could make in the shortened season, or the opportunity a shortened season might mean for their team. But that's a little bit of the asterisk nature of this season, potentially, is star players who are out. Somebody in baseball told me, maybe you think of it as that player was injured. That happens in a given season anyway. You don't have that player and it's out of your control, and you approach it that way. But there's no doubt, and I think Kevin wrote today, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think there's 72 hours to make that determination of whether you're going to sit out. And over the 72 hours, that's the most interesting underlying story of baseball, finding out who decides not to play this season.
All right, final thoughts. Is it seeing the brown uniforms, seeing Jace Tingler finally manage, Tommy Pham in the outfield? What are you most looking forward to besides actual baseball finally starting? Bryce, I'll start with you.
I think every time opening day comes to Petco Park or anywhere in baseball, it's special because there's been this wait, there's this building appetite. Well, this has been magnified 100 times, maybe 1,000 times, because it's taken so long. It's so unusual. There are spot PGA events and NASCAR races and things like that. The Belmont ran the other day, but really for one of the major sports to actually return, and create a season and a season with really interesting dynamics because of how it's structured. I just think seeing baseball in a sprint, whether it's the Padres or not, but watching what this team can do when there's a really unique opportunity in front of them. Nobody could have planned for this. Nobody saw this coming. But you would hope that the Padres understand this is a unique window for a team that's really starved to play in the postseason, no matter what shape that takes.
Forgot about the brown uniforms. That seems
so long ago.
Goodness. Longest off season of all of our lives. I second what Bryce said. I think it's exciting. I do. Okay, even if I were to say it's not legitimate this season, I still think it's exciting.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fascinating. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing you guys as well as everyone else in the flesh, possibly soon at a ballpark here in San Diego, down at Petco Park. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining me today, and take care. See you soon.
Take care.
Stay safe.